Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Mindful Relationship Summit. My name is Kaylee Isaacs, and I'm so happy to be here today with Ray Buckner. Ray Buckner examines and writes on trauma, gender and sexuality, racial oppression, and love and relationships. And today we're here to discuss mindfulness and sexuality. Thank you so much, Ray, for joining us.
Thank you, Kaylee. I'm really very happy and glad to be here. It's such an honor and a privilege to speak to you and also to all the folks who are listening. Just to give some information about myself before I start this talk, I practice at the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, California, and also at a center in Berkeley in the Insight lineage. But I draw heavily on teachings from Thich Nhat Hanh and Pema Chodron to lend to my understanding of the Dharma and how to use the Dharma mostly to address interpersonal, intrapersonal, and structural forms of violence in the forms of racism, sexism, transphobia. And so it's from this space as a white, queer, and trans person. It's from this space of marginalization that I hope to use the Dharma to address some of these sort of systemic ills and find a way toward liberation for our bodies, for our minds, and for our society. So what I want to talk about today is the connection between mindfulness and sex. Mindfulness is so beautiful on so many levels, and I'd like to just talk about, to start, some of the basics of what exactly is mindfulness and what are the characteristics of it. Mindfulness is about bringing a quiet, kind attention to whatever is arising in our mind and our body. It's about not rejecting, not clinging, being fully open to whatever is here and right now. As Pema Chodron talks about, it's about being precise, gentle, and open with whatever is here. It's not calling certain sensations good or bad, but just being here and allowing whatever is here to emanate through the body, through the mind, through the spirit. Sex is in many ways a penultimate space to practice mindfulness, because sex is a space where our bodies are essentially awakening to a myriad of sensations. Sometimes these sensations are pleasant, sometimes they are beautiful, sometimes they are exciting. But like in meditation, sometimes our minds are not here with us in the way we exactly want them to be. Sometimes in sex, there are such sensations as fear and difficulty and confusion, while also feelings of lust and excitement. And that is the beauty of sex, just like mindfulness and just like meditation, is that we have the really beautiful opportunity to open to what is here without judgment, to touch our experience as softly as possible, to understand what our bodies and what our minds need, and also to understand what our partner or partners need as well. So this doesn't sound so difficult, right? So to just be here with what arises, that doesn't seem hard, just like meditation doesn't seem hard. But the issue is that for those of us who are marginalized, for those of us who have experienced trauma, being here with the body, being here with the breath is actually quite difficult, because there are a lot of forces that cause us to get away from our body. One of the aspects that makes sex most beautiful, just as that makes life most beautiful, is that there's an intimate sense of understanding the connection between the body and mind. Is that where there's trauma, when we've experienced emotional, psychological, sexual abuse, or just demeaning treatment in general, there's a breakdown within ourselves. There's a breakdown of understanding, such that the ability to be mindful, the ability to touch our experience with kindness, or delicacy or a gentleness or a sense of loving kindness begins to break down and diminish. When I was in college, I was in a relationship that in many ways, in most ways, was abusive. And in many ways, I felt that in order to survive that relationship, I had to be as quiet as possible in order to not enliven a sense of enragement from her, and a sense of abuse and mistreatment from her. So there was already in me a disconnection between my body and my mind. Perhaps my body knew there was an incredible sense of stress. There was an incredible sense that something's wrong, but I did not allow my mind to sit with that reality because it was too scary, because I knew that if I pushed back, I would receive anger. One of the ways to find ground under my feet was to engage in methods of self-hatred. So there are people like my partner who, when she was angry, she would take her anger out on me. For myself, I found that the only way to survive these encounters was to blame myself, was to say, Ray, well, you must have caused this. You must have brought this on. You need to perform in this way so that she doesn't get on you. And if you don't perform in this way, it's your fault. So in an effort to get ground under my feet, in an effort to find safety, in some ways, in an effort to be kind to myself, in an effort to escape, I engaged in a lot of behaviors of self-hatred, a lot of behaviors of self-blame. Behaviors that are not true to who I am. And I notice that this is common to a lot of folks who experience trauma, both in terms of what society has told us, in terms of for women, for queers, for people of color, that you're to blame, you're a tease, you need to know what you're doing, you don't know, you're too young to know what you want. These narratives fully come into our bodies in these moments and inform how we engage. So again, mindfulness would seem easy to just be with ourselves in that moment, but the reality is that when we're engaging with a partner, particularly a partner who is not listening, who is not caring, who is not compassionate, these other forms of survivability make their way in. Shenpa is a sense of getting hooked. And when we get hooked, we go back to that which is familiar. And in my case, what was familiar was self-hatred. And what was familiar was entering into a trance of unworthiness that allowed me to put the blame on myself rather than have to deal with the reality of what my partner was, how my partner was treating me and the degradation that I was experiencing. When Shenpa happens, everything's breaking down. Communication's breaking down. Our sense of discernment is breaking down. And in addition, what Pema Chodron talks about is when Shenpa takes place, essentially what happens is we're going to war. We're going to war with ourselves and we're going to war with our partners. The invitation of mindfulness and the beauty of mindfulness is that we can return back to ourselves over and over again. We can get triggered, we can be hurt, we can experience joy, and no matter what, we can come back to ourselves and we can pause and we can find our breath again and again. For me, it's very clear the sense of tightness in my chest. When I feel a sense of tightness, when I feel a deep sense of anxiety, when something grips me, I know that I'm being hooked in some way. So sometimes I'm texting, I'm texting a friend or I'm in conflict, and I get really nervous to get that text message. Say it's a partner, for the sake of this conversation. I get a text from a partner who I'm in conflict with. And there's a sense of, oh God, let me not see that text message. When there's that sensation of, let me run, I need to run, that's when I know I'm hooked. That's when I know that there's something in my experience that's getting me to run away from the truth of my body and the truth of my suffering and the truth of my anxiety. What I can do instead is, if I can catch that, to say, I think a lot of us, I know at least for myself, there's very repetitive statements. I think that that's a sign of Shenpa too. Tara Brach talks a lot about this, this is the idea of a trance, is that we go back and back and back. It's a cycle of samsara that's hard to catch, but if you can catch it even once, you can come out of it a little bit. So for instance, with me, my cycle is, I say, I'm a bad person. I'm a bad person. Oh, I don't know how to handle things. I don't know how to handle things. That there's a repetition of phrases that is meant to grip me and keep me in a place where, again, it's a trance of unworthiness. It's a trance of self-hatred to get me to control the situation. Powerfully, Pema Chodron talks about how it's actually with very good intentions that we get hooked. It's actually with very good intentions that we're trying to actually be very kind to ourselves by controlling these situations. But ultimately, it does lead to more suffering. And so the way to decrease the suffering is just to notice as softly as possible. So I'll notice, Ray, I'll say, I'm a bad person. It's like, Ray. And then I whisper words of loving kindness. I'll say, Ray, that's not true. You're wonderful just as you are. You're beautiful just as you are. I use mantras sometimes. So for me, it's about catching the repetition. It's about then noticing and returning to my body to say, okay, so what is that tightness about? What am I really scared of right now? And also, just lastly, in the words of Tara Brach, what am I unwilling to feel? What is calling my attention? So if I can use these phrases to say, well, I'm running away from this. I don't want to touch this. On the one hand, I can just notice, okay, I don't want to touch this. But after that, I can actually use phrases to inquire, so what am I unwilling to feel? What am I really scared of right now? And that can open the door to touching my experience more fully. The only place I know where to start with this, I'm not good at practicing it, but I know where to start with it, is the idea of our basic goodness. Healthy desire has to come from a place of believing that I am lovable just as I am, that I want kindness in my life, that I want joy in my life, and also as a queer person, as a trans person, to say that desire is not wrong. There's nothing innately wrong with desire. Thich Nhat Hanh, in the book How to Love, he does talk about how we need to be very wary of desire. Desire that's not very discerning. And so what he means by that is that if we have a crush, if we have this yearning for someone, are we really wanting that person, or are we running away from whatever? Are we running away from our family problems? Are we running away from our self-hatred? Are we looking to escape? This is, I think, the difference between healthy desire and unhealthy desire. Are we looking to come home, or are we looking to escape? Are we looking to escape in the sense of finding refuge, a false refuge or an unskillful refuge, in sexuality, in having sex, in this desire that, again, maybe you don't even know the person, but you build up fantasies about them? Are you having desire because you feel like you're never going to find someone who's going to love you as you are, so then you try to cling on and attach to that person? That's happened a lot to me. I feel that because of my past as a genderqueer person, I don't sometimes feel all that attractive. So I feel that I can't end a relationship. How could I end a relationship when someone might not find me attractive in the future? So that when you're coming from a place like that, that's not a full place. That's a place of fear. That's a place of being scared. So healthy desire is about really knowing what you want. from a place of loving kindness, from a place of a gentle embrace, to say, you know, I want to be with someone who helps me understand my values better. I want to be with someone who understands where I want to be touched and in what ways I want to be touched. I want to be with someone who understands how I communicate, that understands my traumas, that pushes me to pursue my goals, pursue my aspirations. So yes, desire, this is why I think that my understanding of sex is that it's very much intertwined with other aspects of our embodiment, you know? It's just that sex is a very salient space of bodily awakening and bodily vulnerability. And first and foremost, healthy desire or healthy sex is being in a space of being with someone who can treat your body, your mind, your spirit well. Any sense of abuse, any sense of mistreatment, any sense of harm. Obviously, there's nothing healthy in that. And when I say obviously, that's not to say that it's my fault or anyone else's fault for staying in what is unhealthy. But it's to say that, especially when we have space, you know, Tara Brach again talks about it as the power of the pause. When we have space to pause, we can actually see fully into what we want, what we yearn for, and what we desire in such a way that it's really what we desire, not what society tells us, not what our parents tell us, not what an unhealthy ex tells us we should want or how we should act. It's really about touching most intimately what we need and what we want, and following that as fully and as truthfully as possible.
I love how you phrased that so simply in the beginning there, of whether our desire is helping us to run away from something or to come home. And in my head, I was phrasing it in a similar way of, you know, is our desire helping us to wake up or to fall asleep? And what aspects of our relationships in general are helping us to wake up or to fall asleep? Mm-hmm. And yeah, so thank you for that. I have just a couple more questions. These are questions that we ask all of the presenters, and they're just sort of quick, fun ones. So let's see. If there was one thing that you wish you knew about relationships when you were younger, what would that be? That you could tell your younger self.
What would I tell my younger self? It's a really difficult question. I wish I knew how hard it is for people to be honest with themselves. I think that I grew up believing that relationships would be easy, and easy in a Buddhist sense, in the sense of if we can only touch our experiences, of course we'd be fine. I did not know that touching one's experience would be so hard. I did not know that people I would be with and other folks that I've been in contact with, I did not know that there would be such a struggle against what we're experiencing. And I think, just on another more personal note, I just wish that I knew the importance of self-love and compassion. I wish that I think that part of what, going back to your last question, part of what's unhealthy is relying so much on the other person. And I wish that I knew that it's important to create space to continuously come back through mindfulness, through meditation, through processes of discernment, to come back to yourself, to come back to myself, to say, Ray, how are you? What's going on? So I think that sort of dual understanding of that it's really hard for people to touch their experience, particularly when they're suffering, and that it's important for me to come back to myself always in terms of what's happening in my body and my mind.
Mm-hmm.